They're automatically
Yeah.
going to be approved for a regular
Recreation,
rent.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
Yeah, but that won't be enough for them.
Oh, no, I,
Eight, put 18.
well, they'll need, the rest can be adapted.
Yeah, with them.
Okay, we're on the air.
We are on the air? Good evening, at 7 o'clock, we'll call the planning board meeting to order. First up for general information is Chris Carney.
Hi. My name's Chris Carney. I'm here from our Levesque Associates in Westfield on behalf of Peter Jelinus, who's proposing an 8-lot subdivision off Shattuck Road in Hadley. We've gone through the preliminary procedure and we're on to the definitive now. The site property lines have remained the same from preliminary to definitive, just the addition of some grading and stormwater details to the definitive. Got a stormwater report, 2 applications, and 9 plan sets.
Okay.
Should I file this?
One of the questions that we raised, and we don't need an answer tonight, but how is he going to handle, what is the proposal to handle the comply with inclusionary zoning bylaw?
I know we've discussed that, and he's planning on, I think, purchasing a separate parcel outside of this property for inclusionary housing.
Okay. But how will it be administered? Because the town housing authority wants no part of the administering the inclusionary zoning portion. So just be aware of that,
Okay.
okay?
Do you have mailing labels in here?
No, we did not provide mailing labels.
I
We
need
have an
two,
abutters list, but no
I
mailing.
need 2 sets of mailing labels.
Okay.
Actually, we don't need to notify of the approval. We just have to notify of the,
Also, we need one set
One set?
Really?
No.
Really?
that's just a special permit.
Or can I drop those off? We could have those tomorrow.
Oh, just put them in a town hall mailing. Town hall, there's a mailbox in a town hall for planning board, just put them in there.
Great, can do that.
It's outside the town clerk's office.
I think we've selected Doucette Associates to do the peer review.
You answered the question before I asked it.
This, we went through the preliminary with
Yeah.
them, chose them for the definitive as well.
So instead of presenting a subdivision definitive plan and we have a peer review and Doucette is the engineer that's going to review the plans.
I think before the next meeting, we'll have some back and forth with Doucette in regards to some waivers that we're requesting.
Want to aim for the 5th or the 19th?
Probably the 19, because Larry might be here on the 5th doing some stuff.
December 19th?
Yes.
Is it 8 lots?
8 lots, yes.
Take that, there's a filing fee on there.
So you can deliver that check for the filing fee to the town clerk.
There's one set of plans.
With an additional set.
How many sets do you have here?
9 sets, and then I just brought 2 11 by 17s for you.
Okay. If you don't want to make another, you can take one of these and use those.
We'll leave that with you.
Okay.
So you drop the check off at the clerk, you drop the mailing label off
Oh.
outside her office.
What is Collier Estates, okay. You take that. Okay. Just the. Wait a minute, you put it.
That should be for 36.
3,600, oh, you got, you, wow. Yep,
So,
take this with one set of plans to the town clerk.
okay, it says 325 in additional?
No. I tried to, it's not clear. It's 3,600, but you already got that right amount, so it's $1,000 fee plus 325 per lot, so I put 1,000 fee plus 325. This will know where the 36 came from, what you already knew.
If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
No, I mean, could get the review done, 12/19. We'd like to have the report at least a week ahead of time,
Okay.
not on the 18th or the 19th, the day of the 19th. And the engineers are known for doing that, getting it the last minute, so try to press on whoever the reviewer is to get at least a week ahead of time.
Sure. And there's a chance there'll be a revised set of plans based on any comments that they have.
Yeah, we understand that.
Can we bring those to the meeting?
We bring the revised set of plans to the meeting, yes.
So not ahead of schedule?
No, we don't need the schedule.
No one to look at them.
We'll go to look at it, yeah, just bring probably, depending how many revisions you have, with just some simple stuff, one set will do with some serious thing, you can probably bring two, just to get spread out and look at it closer. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Donald,
Mr. Chairman, do I need to sign in? I hate to interrupt, but I was here a little late after 6:45.
there, you're signed in, how's that?
All right.
We do have a public hearing at 7:15 though.
Yes. And,
That will take a while.
yeah,
I'm in no rush.
Donald Cross or Gross?
Gross.
Gross.
I'm here from Miracle. I guess you, we're trying to open up a new location at 207 Russell Street,
Yes.
and evidently you had some questions about the nature of our business before you could issue permits, including Mark Healy.
What's the sign?
No, they just want to know what our nature of our business was.
So it's a business use, your district, where you are located is in the aquifer. So the first thing we need to know is business use in the aquifer, what are you gonna do there?
Okay, we're a hearing aid business, so we,
Is this an existing business structure, or this is a conversion, of what are you doing?
207 is a brand-new building that we're leasing space from.
Across from Hadley Auto.
and
Oh, you're in the new building that's already been approved on the
It's
site.
been all approved and everything, and I guess they had questions about just what our traffic
Okay.
flow was.
What we wanna do is see what your sign gonna look like? You're gonna have a sign on the building?
They haven't even come up with what they want it to look like yet, so we don't have that yet.
Okay, as far as a hearing aid business, that's not a problem. We're concerned, because you're in the aquifer, we're looking for anything that could pollute the aquifer.
Okay,
Obviously, you're selling hearing aids, that's not a problem.
yeah, the landlord hasn't determined what signage he wants to go with yet.
Okay, so,
That's it?
that's it.
Okay.
Thank you. When you have a sign, we just wanna see what the sign looks like.
Okay.
Or if the landlord wants to bring in a batch of them, that's fine.
Yeah, that's what we're planning. All right,
Okay.
great, thank you.
Thank you. That was easy.
Where's that building?
Were those two new white buildings across from Hadley Auto?
Where the nail plates were?
Yeah, right next to the back of the other side of the hill. David Tanner?
Oh, yeah.
My name is David Tanner. I'm here representing Tesla this evening. I'm going to pass out some handouts here. We're looking to place a supercharger station in Hadley, and this would be located at the Pride Store facility along the back line. This handout shows a picture of what one of our supercharger stations typically looks like constructed. Which door would you like me to look? Sure, of course. If you don't mind sharing.
No,
them.
that's fine.
On the first page is just one of our stations has been constructed. The second page is a rendering which shows some of our equipment that powers those charging stations in the background. And then the third page is a line diagram showing the type of equipment that comprises the supercharger station.
So this is gonna go into the parking lot that's existing?
Well, they're
Or is it-
constructing it now. So that-
Yes, but you have the parking lot already laid out, so is this gonna be additional parking for the charging station, or are you gonna use the existing parking places?
We would be using some of the existing parking spaces. With our supercharger stations, when we build this many, we're placing 12. In this situation, we would only reserve a few, so we wouldn't exceed what Pride's existing parking count would allow. So I can lay out a plan for you.
How long does it take to charge one of the vehicles?
Sure, so it depends on the battery size as
How
well
many,
as...
how many Teslas are registered in Hampshire County?
I don't have that information, I could get it for you if you like.
Yes,
But, but as far as how long it takes to charge one of these vehicles, so if you were to enter the station with a 20% charge in the car, because normally it takes them all the way down, to 70% drive the car, and then charge up to about 80%, your dwell time is going to be between 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Our typical dwell time at one of our supercharger stations is about 48 minutes. So, of course, people are hitting on both sides. So if you have a 65 rated battery, it's much shorter. If you have a 100 rated battery, you're going to be a little longer to get a full charge.
This is the new price station?
Yes.
How can they come back with another business after the,
Well, they can. He's applying for a revision of site plan approval, or another site plan approval.
We got plenty of solar fields in Hadley, so you shouldn't have any trouble getting electricity.
Well, the question is, if, you know, how many stations you have? 10, 12?
We have 12.
12, so you anticipate some usage there.
We do.
And at any one time, you could have 4 or 5 people charging?
This station will accommodate 12 cars charging simultaneously. In addition to that, we're placing 4 universal chargers next to it. So that's what these symbols are.
So you're using the parking that was allocated under our zoning bylaws to other parts of the business.
Correct.
So, of course, with the electric car movement, we're looking to displace the normal conventional vehicle with electric vehicles. I see what your point is, though. That won't happen on the first day of business. So
No,
you're
no,
concerned-
but nevertheless, it's going to be going there, it's going to be usurping the parking, so that was already allocated according to the zoning bylaws, square footage, parking, blah, 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 all of that.
What we're
I see your
saying,
point.
what we're getting to is they or you will need more than likely to supply 12 new parking spaces, not use existing parking spaces. Because the parking spaces are being allotted according to the square footage of the store for customers. So if you're using these as a separate entity or separate business use from this building, then additional parking should be supplied to do that.
I understand your point. We would have to figure out what the current parking allocation is. From what I understand, they typically plan the stations with an abundance of parking, and then figure out how
Our
many
zoning
parking.
bylaw requires 2 for 1, 2 square feet of parking per square foot of building,
Understand.
okay? So,
I'm just curious, where do you pay for your electricity? At the Pride station? Do you use a credit card here? Or?
So for all of our existing customers that bought the Model S and Model X in the past, the charging on these is free at the superchargers for the duration of the life of the vehicle.
Who's paying for the electricity?
Tesla.
You've got meters on each of these quote-unquote pumps?
We have 1 meter on the transformer, and that's what we would pay, obviously, the electricity on. In the future, and for all cars sold after this year, including all the Model 3s that are coming out in the future, all those cars will be paying some rate that's equivalent to the electricity bill. So they would be paying for their own
does
charge.
the Teslas have to be charged at one of these stations, or can you charge them at home if you have?
No, you can charge them at home. absolutely.
So it only takes 125 volts to charge it, 250, 240, whatever it
You
is?
can do a 110, it would take a good while to be able to charge it. You can do a 240, and you can range anywhere from 20 to 100 amps on a home charger, depending on what you have available.
Okay,
And then these systems are based on 480 volt,
okay.
and they're flowing about 120 kW. So it's a substantial amount of power, which enables us to charge a vehicle in about 40 minutes as opposed to 6 to 8 hours.
Okay. It's just curious.
So you may be optimistic putting 12 in, so to seek out more parking, perhaps you'd want to cut it down to see how it goes, and then you, well, we're not telling you how to design it, but
Of course. To your point, so we build, obviously for the future, we're not building for today. So as these spots become more and more utilized, we don't expect to see 12 cars charging there. It has the capacity, obviously, to charge them all at the same time, 100% load, all taken into account. We've determined that with Eversource. The number of cars you'll see charging there in the first year will increase in the coming years, but so will the number of electric cars that are on the road. So we're hoping that the displacement of the existing parking would be matched over time by the replacement by electric vehicles.
I saw a Tesla charging field coming over the Sagamore Bridge from the Cape, and they probably had a dozen, and there wasn't one car charging.
That's absolutely the case. Again, we're building for the future, so these stations are being built, with projections of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out in advance, and then at that point, we would probably be expanding into the fuel pump islands and moving the existing fuel pumps to that. Again, we're progressing or projecting displacement of conventional vehicles by electric vehicles over time, and we're building for it now. So the question I think I would have for the planning board is, do you need for us to replace 100% of the parking that would be required, or would some ratio be appropriate based on the fact that we are overbuilding our infrastructure at this time?
that's your call. It's if you can find a lot more parking on your site, you can have 12, but I think it's going to be a little tight. With
Right.
the drainage issue, you're going to have to increase, you're going to have to go back to the Conservation Commission
Of
to
course.
make more parking.
I guess that's why my question was, do we have to do 12 for 12? Or given the fact that we're planning on having quite a bit of reserve capacity here, would it be appropriate to do some lesser number?
Well,
Well, if you're building it for 12, then it's 12 cars. If it's for today or for 10 years from now. Or you're gonna build half the lot.
I don't know, I don't know, I go back to the zoning bylaw, we require 2 square feet of parking per building floor space, so you need 15,000 square feet of parking, which, if you're taking up 12 spaces here and 4 here, I know you're saying you're not gonna be using it all today, and you're giving, well, we anticipate this, however, we have to design for what we have today. And if in the future it turned out to be excess, well, it may be excess, but I would anticipate that Tesla needs to supply 12 new parking spaces to take up for these parking spaces, okay?
Plus the 2 universals, so that's actually 14.
I see.
Okay.
And so if we were to reserve 4 of the spaces for Tesla parking, the rest of it's general parking, meaning anyone can park there, it's not restricted to just Teslas, would that change the factor of how many parking spaces we would need?
So in other words, you'd have 4 for Tesla, and even though you had meters, anybody could park there anyway.
That's the current plan, yes.
But the whole point is they're putting a meter for that specific thing.
Yeah, but if it's being taken up by somebody else, then they just can't charge a vehicle, that's all it's gonna be.
Exactly. So that would allow for general parkers to come in and displace the electric vehicles, and that's essentially how the plan works. So for now, they're going to be occupied by general vehicles. In the future, we would adjust the number of reserved spaces at electric vehicle charging stations to account for the fact that there's an increased number of EVs on the road. So for now, if we could have 4 reserved spaces, then we would have to find an additional area for 4 additional parking spots, assuming that they don't have that in the reserve capacity already.
So I don't know if they have excess capacity on the site.
We'd have to make a determination of that, of course.
Okay.
We also have some constraints that we don't allow in front yard setback, which, because it's a corner lot, there are 2 front yards.
Oh, it's not going to be easy.
So,
But it's easier to find 4 than it is 14. So, again, we're laying out some theoreticals, but it is based on, our reservation of spaces is based on how many we need now.
If you only need 4, if you couldn't just reserve 4 per Tesla and the other could be either or, then I think you're right. I would go along with you only need 4 additional spaces.
Okay. And I guess the question is, if we reserve none, meaning that 12 general parking vehicles could come in and take every single one of these spaces and completely displace all the electric vehicles. And we'd hate to do that, but if it's impossible for us to find the additional parking spaces, would that be acceptable for
Well,
all?
yeah, because I would say yes, that would be okay.
Okay.
So our concern is we have no other place to put the parking for this business. There's
understand.
no on-street parking, so we absolutely have to, each business has to support its own parking demand entirely,
I understand.
and some don't.
Right, and I don't know what the pad site is there that you guys planned or how much parking they need.
For this one, we don't need a,
Exactly, so,
they're just reserving that, and they're showing us a
Right.
future build-out,
exactly.
and they don't know that that could be anything from a restaurant to a business, an office, we don't know. He doesn't
And
know.
you guys know the way this thing is set up. He's got enough parking for the square footage of that building.
Because we went through site plan approval, that was included.
I know that, but if you're adding now anything above that and beyond that, and that's not gonna be enough parking.
Right, if we were to reserve it, absolutely.
That's what we're talking about, John. And
Yes.
and this is a tight space. It's just not a little convenience store. There's going to be a liquor store there. There's going to be
Right,
a
it's gonna be a lot of action.
lot of action there. There's going to be a lot of traffic.
My opinion is they need the parking. The only good thing is, this is not built. And depending if this turns to be parking all over the place, when he goes to build this, he's gonna have to modify parking over here to satisfy it.
Absolutely, because if he didn't have enough parking and it was overflowing into the lot next door, he's gonna upset that other tenant, he's gonna have to resolve that.
Well, yeah, and not only that, there could be a busy area. So we wanna make sure that he would have to be able to modify to make it fit here, yeah.
We have taken this to the Conservation Commission, they reviewed this, there are some notes on one of these drawings that shows we have to adjust the location of our gear a bit over, and then we have to account for the displacement of the water if there is a flood. We're also moving it over to retain one tree that was in the footprint of where our gear was designed. Aside from that, I haven't heard any other concerns by commission, and we presented to chief and building inspector, but their primary concerns that they're looking for was the location of a propane tank, which was relocated subsequent to that. So I don't have their approval, but we have reviewed it with them preliminarily, and I believe that it's safe to say that they didn't see any glaring issues. Of course, they have to provide final approvals. Okay.
So it sounds like you have to talk to Pride and their engineers about how much excess parking there is on the
Right.
site.
And if there is excess parking, then we would be able to take a 1-for-1 for reserved electric. Otherwise, they have to all remain simply enabled, meaning that anyone general parking could park there
Yes.
and potentially be completely displaced, which I would hope not, but
Yes.
we do at the site that we have. Any other questions I can answer, anyone? Okay.
That's the one that I think, this is the one that has the
I'm
drawing.
happy to leave this one if you like, and
This seems to have an arrow.
Oh, yeah, okay.
yeah, that's the one I need to get back to our engineers to make the adjustments. I can
Okay.
hold this up for you.
Okay.
And then, as far as the process going forward, we would, I believe, seek commission's approval, Conservation Commission, and then return in 2 weeks with sets of plans for review for the
Yeah,
site.
As long as there is enough parking on site, it's just a informal revision.
Okay, and I'm sorry, the informal review, would it occur at commission in 2 weeks?
Yeah, can you do it at this
We
session?
don't need a public hearing.
How are people gonna know Tesla pumps are here, for better word, charging stations?
I would love to show you guys how the UI in the car works, but essentially what happens if you're in
So you're not gonna have
wherever
any
you are, Southern
signs on-
Connecticut,
you're
you
not-
say, I wanna go to Still. You punch into the computer in the car, a big
Okay.
14-inch screen, and it says stop here, stop here, stop
So
here.
you're not gonna have any signs on site?
Well, we were thinking about a small monument sign, something small, but again, that would have to go through you for approval. But otherwise, we don't need signage for people to find where to go. So it's a pretty neat system, and again, be happy to show anyone if they like. Thank you very much for your time.
Free charging.
Okay, it's 25 after 7, we will open the public hearing. The Hadley Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals will conduct a joint public hearing on Tuesday, November 7th, 2017, beginning 7:15 p.m. in the Hadley Senior Center Meeting Room. The purpose of the hearing is to review the application of East Street Commons for an amendment to its senior housing special permit by the Planning Board for a variance of the zoning bylaw, section 27.5.8, and allow applicant to make a payment in lieu of providing affordable housing units in the development. The application and plan may be viewed in the town clerk's office during normal business hours, published twice in the Gazette, October 24 and 31. And we will let Attorney Wiley.
Reed, close, yes. Good evening, Tom Reedy, attorney with Bacon Wilson over in Amherst, Peter McConnell's office, here on behalf of East Street Commons. In its petition for a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals and for a modification of the existing special permit from the Planning Board. With me this evening, as you all know, Barry Roberts, manager of East Street Commons LLC. And so I'm happy to address this in whatever order or just kind of take it all together. Really what we are looking to do is from the Zoning Board of Appeals to get a variance from literal enforcement of section 27.5.8 of the Town of Hadley zoning bylaw, which amongst other things requires affordable units, as that term is defined, to be provided within a senior housing development and managed and monitored by the Hadley Housing Authority. By way of a little bit of background, I know that the Planning Board is familiar with this because I think they lived it. There has been a long process with this development and I think the senior housing district zoning bylaw for many years. Mr. Roberts received approval last February for his special permit. One of the requirements, according to the zoning bylaw 27.5.8, was to utilize the Hadley Housing Authority to provide affordable units. Subsequent to that February decision, Mr. Roberts, in fact, got in touch with the Hadley Housing Authority and endeavored to utilize them to have the units placed in this development. Unfortunately, Hadley Housing Authority wasn't interested in participating in that. And it's put Mr. Roberts in a bind such that he is unable to comply with the terms of the special permit and with the terms of the zoning bylaw. We have been in discussions with the planning board for a zoning amendment in an effort to get a payment in lieu of actually providing those affordable units as part of the zoning bylaw. My understanding is that at town meetings, maybe in 2013, and Mr. Dwyer, please correct me if I'm wrong, there was an attempt to have that payment in lieu of actually providing those affordable units as part of the senior housing zoning bylaw. Unfortunately, that did not pass in town meeting. It did pass in the inclusionary zoning portion of the bylaw. So really what we would be looking to do is, in lieu of providing those affordable units at the condominium development, we would be looking, Mr. Roberts would be looking to pay in lieu of actually providing those. And for those funds to, within the discretion of the planning board, either be held in escrow by my office, by the town, and then hopefully in the spring, if the Affordable Housing Trust is created, to immediately fund that Affordable Housing Trust. And so really this is, on a technical level, the mechanism by which we can effectuate that. And so it would be the Zoning Board of Appeals granting a variance from specific literal enforcement of 27.5.8. And then the Planning Board modifying the existing special permit to either eliminate that condition or modify, I think it's condition 7, that would, instead of requiring Mr. Roberts to provide those affordable housing units at the site, it would be to pay some certain in lieu of providing each of those units. I'm happy to go into more background, more detail, any questions the zoning board has or the planning board.
If possible, we could go first. because I'm ill and I need to leave. Don't feel
Yes. Do you have any questions about it? Do you understand what he said?
Yeah, I got the background before I came in, so, and what you said is exact with that background.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, we're just granting, we would just be looking at the variance aspect of it and any of the other portions about the contributions and the payment in lieu of, I think it would be with you guys, because I think our only purview is the variance.
So there's one catch, I think, in the variance, because we don't have an affordable housing trust fund. If you do grant a variance to allow payment in lieu of providing affordable units, I think there has to be something in the variance saying where the money is going to be held. So just think about that. I think we have to have both the purpose it's going to be held for and where it's going to be held.
You know, my feeling on this whole thing is that this board is jumping way ahead of the game here. Until we establish a trust fund, until town meeting acknowledges it, the people accept it, then we can go forward. Otherwise, I would recommend that the developer put in these affordable housing units on that premises, because we attended that workshop and there is consultants and administration out there to handle it. Our housing authority refused to do it. We're not the housing authority, you're not the housing authority. Our job, your job, is to protect the best interests of this town, and that's why I sit here. And as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Roberts, with his attorney or attorneys, should have known the laws and everything else. Not, we had our laws in place, we don't have a housing trust. And I'm very leery about it, because when you take the housing issue, you look at, we're surrounded with colleges, they're grabbing up everything that sits in this town. We have our 10% housing here, but if we take that, he builds it, we get credited for that towards that 40B, chapter 40B, where someone can come in and build all these apartments in there. But if we're sitting on money with no, we can't even get people to run for selectmen, never mind appoint people to hold a housing authority. And I certainly would urge the zoning board of appeals, do not allow this to happen. It is not thought out long and hard, and it's, what's the repercussion of this? How this is gonna work? And my question is, if he takes the 5 units of affordable housing, that opens those 5 units, say if they're $250,000 housing, he could build $500,000. That makes his project more valuable. You know, I thought even that if there was some kind of a way we could have the developer take North Hadley Hall and change that into affordable housing. And it would be a trade-off to make it work. But again, we're not ready to do this. This is, you know, we never sat down with town council. We went to one meeting, and here we are trying to ram something through that neither the zoning board really understands it or this planning board totally understands it. So how could you vote?
I don't know.
Let's let them take it. It's their hearing. It's their part of the hearing.
Well, no.
I for one do understand it, so
I can make
I
it.
take issue with that. But I think it would be good for us to take some questions, field some questions. You have any?
If funds are set aside into an escrow account, is it possible that the variance could be granted in terms of Or can a variance be granted, I mean, when funds don't necessarily have any place to go, that they be held until, or in the event of the establishment of a fund? Are we literally held by the availability of a fund or someone to manage it? I mean, isn't that what escrow is for?
Well, there's a couple, Tom can answer that better, but once we establish, my question is, once we establish the trust fund, now we have to do something with it.
Okay, but that's not,
Well, no,
no, the
yes,
question
yes,
is,
no,
can they
I-
grant the variance if the fund doesn't exist?
Well,
Exactly.
I think we have to know if there is a fund, if they do establish a fund, what do we do with the
You
money?
don't necessarily
But that's
have to do
not-
anything with
but
it.
that's
You don't
not
have to do
really-
anything with it. You can sit there for 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's far beyond our reach in terms of the ZBA. I mean, really, what he's come before us to say is that, look, the Hadley Housing Authority refuses to accept the responsibility of these units, and the project, I mean,
Well, I think the Hadley Housing Authority can't accept responsibility for
Yes,
this.
The funds aren't going to the Hadley Housing Authority.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I would just suggest, I guess the answer to the question would be yes, that you can establish an escrow fund that could be funded, provided that the planning board takes care of this second part of it this evening. And it could be a fund held in escrow either by the town, and we can either donate it as a gift to be appropriated as seen fit, or to be earmarked for affordable housing. And I think with that understanding, if, you know, even with the caveat that to fund an affordable housing trust, should it be created within, let's say, the next 5 years, and if not, then to be utilized by the town for affordable housing. And I think, I mean, that's the purpose of this. By no means is Mr. Roberts looking to get around this affordable piece. I think it's just with this development and the state that it's in, and quite respectfully, when we're talking about where the town is overall, you could have 615 additional year-round housing units added to the inventory without any affordable units, and you would still be above that 10%. So this 5 that we're really talking about here is not going to move the needle really at all. I think it's maybe 0.2, or, I mean, you go from 13 to maybe 12.9, so maybe 0.1% is what you're actually changing here. And so we would suggest that, yes, that fund could be established. We would, Mr. Roberts would fund that escrow account to be utilized, hopefully in the spring if town meeting does pass the Affordable Housing Trust. And if not, if the board wants to bring it back, or if the town wants to look at it, maybe held there for 5 years until it's created, and if not, then for affordable housing, and even if it's through, you know, the CPA, or maybe the, you know, somebody to administer it for affordable housing.
It almost appears that you are encouraging us to build more affordable housing, whereas we have this cushion, like you said, for many years. If we have this trust fund, we form a committee, if you get the right people on the committee, they're gonna say, well, let's build more affordable housing, so they're gonna force more affordable housing on us, and they may force it into a place that the neighbors may not like it.
Understood, and I think it would be up to the discretion of the town whether or not those funds are utilized. But I think the important piece is to have those funds, and not, you know, when I say earmark it for affordable housing, I'm not saying actually creating the affordable housing, because I think there are some ancillary processes that go along with the affordable housing, and whether it's some, you know, housing production plan, or if the board has other suggestions about how to utilize those funds appropriately, I mean, I think we're all ears. But knowing that at this stage, we're coming before you asking for a modification to have a payment in lieu, we thought that it was appropriate to at least earmark it for affordable housing. And if it's used, like I said, not necessarily to create, but to study, or to identify land that could be purchased for affordable housing in the future, I mean, I think that's the important piece here.
And once again, Sunderland bought land for affordable housing, and they could not get a developer to go along with it because they wanted to build apartment complexes. They envisioned a few affordable units, but they were turned down. So we're opening up not a can of worms, but we're walking into a territory we don't know enough about, or I don't know enough about it. And for example, how much money are you going to contribute, and how does that affect the per unit? How much money will you contribute?
Sure, and I don't want to necessarily separate, because I don't know what part the zoning board has for this, but as far as this board is concerned, so what we've done is taken a look at what it would cost for the affordable units. So 782 square feet multiplied by $150 per square foot gets us to a number, I think it's $117,000. And then Mr. Roberts looked at the per unit acquisition and site development costs, and that comes out to $112,000. You add those two together, it's $229,000, and you subtract what these units could have been sold for, because they would be restricted, as we have talked about before, and per unit, they could be sold for $157,000. So we took what it cost minus what they could be sold for, and we came up with a difference of about $70,000 for ballpark. So we would take that number, multiply it by 5 for the number of units that wouldn't be provided, and so that would be $350,000 would be that payment in lieu. And so that would be the amount that would go into this escrow, hopefully to fund that affordable housing trust or to be utilized for the affordable housing. And I think, when we're talking about going down a road, we are only talking about these 5 units. I mean, I think the circumstances surrounding Mr. Roberts' project have been different than, there's no other senior housing developments that have come forward in town that I know of. And we're at this point, and nobody else is at this point. And I think that it's not a Pandora's box or opening up a can of worms, because I think it's a unique situation that we're really looking to address for Mr. Roberts, for his specific situation on that specific parcel of land, in order to help him along.
So ballpark, if this variance is approved and if the 5 affordable units are not built, are we gonna have about $1 million worth higher taxable real estate on the property?
I think that's fair to say.
Ballpark,
Yeah, I
so
think
we
that
will
would
be
fair to
getting
say.
taxes on $1 million versus 117 times 500. Okay.
The whole thing, when this project came forward in front of this planning board, it was the intent of building 5 affordable housing. And if that wasn't there, and they were gonna be, you didn't talk about trust funds in it, I would have never voted for this project, to accept this project. Until this is cleared.
Was the Hadley Housing Authority on board at the beginning of breaking ground for this project? At what point did the Housing Authority say that they weren't going to end up in this pickle?
Well, it was in the decision that this board made. It was in your bylaw that instructed me to go there. So when I got my plans approved from you folks, I sent a letter to Hadley Housing Authority and said, I'm ready to go. We want to create these units. And they responded. I never got a written response, but verbally, and I've been in here with Mr. Dan Lico, who will substantiate that. They're not interested in doing it, and won't do it.
So the bylaws have been on the books the inclusionary zoning has been on the books for almost 10 years, and the senior housing has been on the books for 4 or 5 years. The wording has been in there since day one in both of these. Nobody ever questioned it, including the housing authority. When the housing authority was approached by Mr. Roberts, they went to the state housing authority. The state housing authority says, no, you should not do that. And the state, what is the state unit? There's two.
So there's a subsidized housing unit?
There's a subsidized housing unit, and there's the housing authority, 2 different state agencies. The state subsidized housing unit says, yes, this affordable housing should be administered by the local housing authorities. The state housing authority says, no, they shouldn't touch it. So you got 2 different state agencies doing this, and therefore, we're at the bottom of the barrel, and we're all of a sudden everybody had right intention. Mr. Roberts and us, and even the Housing Authority wasn't exactly against it. They went to the state for direction. That was the direction that came back from the state. And when somebody else asked them the same question, they have told multiple housing authorities, you shouldn't be touching these separate housing authorities. You only deal with what you have.
Had the construction started by the time this problem arose?
The physical houses, the site work had started, yes.
So site work had started, and any framed homes?
I can't be sure whether we get started on lot 1 or not.
It just strikes me as strange that, wouldn't have done more research to find out exactly who was going to oversee these senior affordable units, is that correct?
Yes, so it's
Okay.
55 and over, and I think the zoning bylaw requires Hadley Housing Authority, so.
But now that's another question. Isn't Hadley Housing Authority not Hadley Housing? Isn't that federal?
I think it's a quasi-state agency.
State runs it though.
So it is not a municipal agency. As far as I understand it, it's not a municipal agency. However, they were looped in under the zoning bylaw, and so.
What would happen with these 5 units with the literal enforcement of the like when Johnny says build the units, what would that even what
They
would
would
happen?
probably sit vacant. We would have to we would either be out of compliance with the zoning bylaw because if Hadley Housing Authority say no, we are not doing it.
Which they've said.
Then we can't comply.
But there is an agency that will administer and do
There
it.
are plenty of agencies that
Right.
we have talked to. We have never got to that point with them. We've got their percentage that they want to take, etc. But again, we're here for the Hadley. It's the Hadley.
Well, even that would require.
At that Amherst meeting, I specifically asked the person that was running the meeting, if the housing authority, can we make them do it? No. Is there some other agency that can do this? Yes.
But the
And
bylaw.
it has happened in other towns.
Sure, and I can give you firsthand experience from Amherst. There's Amherst
Then
Housing
Why
Authority.
are you guys so against building the 5 units?
Because the Hadley Housing Authority is charged with monitoring these units, with finding the people to occupy these units. And the Hadley Housing Authority is not willing to do that.
I don't know if it's not willing. Are you being accurate? Because I understood that it was unable, that it was not within its purview.
Maybe that's a finer point.
Well, that's a difference.
Sure, I think the effect might be the same as far as our perspective. I think the fact that we cannot comply because Hadley Housing Authority is, I'll use unable to help us comply. And so, this isn't something that was just, concocted under the cover of darkness. This is something that we have been coming before the planning board to try to resolve, whether it was to get intermittent certificates of occupancy to allow the construction to continue, whether it was talking to various entities who could in fact do it. We're still left with what the bylaw says. There's also a condition in the special permit that requires qualification on the subsidized housing inventory, which is different than what the zoning bylaw actually requires. And so taking all of that, the totality of everything, we took a look and said, this is one project, here's one way, we think the right way to solve it, and it would require this process to get the variance from literal enforcement. And then
I'm concerned, and someone on the planning board already mentioned this, that the amount of money put into a trust would cover the costs that the town would face down the road, and that would be protected for senior affordable housing.
when you say protected,
Not used for other purposes, approved by a town meeting. I could think of any number of reasons why it might be funds that sit out there and.
Back to my point,
Yeah.
it still allows Mr. Roberts the opportunity to present and put the funds into an escrow account, at which then the town can deem how to use those funds appropriately.
Right, but if there's enough funds there to cover costs down the road.
Cost
And
of
if
what?
the town meeting,
I'm sorry.
Well, someone said it here, that you might end up having affordable housing units that you can't find someone to build, and/or that you find someone to build and you don't have people to occupy them, and the town would be absorbing some of those costs, just not all of them.
From my perspective, I look at the financing side of this. If you bring this to a banker and say, I need a mortgage, and he's gonna ask the potential buyer what his income is, as you know. And he's saying, oh, I have to pay $117,000 for it. And the banker's gonna say, well, you can't afford a $100,000 mortgage. You can only afford a $70,000 mortgage. Well, clearly the person's not gonna have $50,000 as down payment because they probably wouldn't be buying an affordable house or be trying to buy one. So it doesn't work in the real world as far as I'm concerned. It just doesn't work. That's why rentals make a lot of sense.
Yep, I agree.
So that is part of the problem here. If these were rental units, they would be much easier to administer.
Sure.
Because Wingate, Winfield, whatever it does, rental units. Multiple other places do rental units. It's because they are wholly owned condominiums that this is turning into such a exercise.
Now, assuming the housing authority wanted to do this, and they said, yeah, we want you to go buy one of these things. And so they went through all that work, filtering out this person, and the guy goes to the bank, the woman goes to the bank and said, well, we can't give you a mortgage. So it's back to square one again.
This affordable housing trust that is keep talked about doesn't have to be used for people to purchase houses. It can be used, let's just pick an example. You've got X amount of money in the fund. A very simple example, an existing two-family house comes available in town. That could be used to purchase that two-family house, make it affordable rentals, and the appropriate local agency, or even could be sold to a private agency that would administer and keep in perpetuity that as a rental subsidized low-end affordable unit housing. Okay, so it doesn't have to be done to purchase, the money doesn't have to be reused for purchasing for sale. It can be used to purchase a building, construct a building, and then turned into a rental property for affordable.
You know, that's all we're doing is speculating here. Until we sit down, and I asked before at this meeting, sit down with town council to set up some guidelines in a bylaw that the town can accept, but to protect this town. We're just guessing. We don't know for sure. And that's what's so bad about this. You guys are gonna give a permit for something clearly and totally not understood. Just speculating.
I think as far as it is before our board, I mean, it sounds like the process is broken in terms of the bylaw. I don't even know that the bylaw could be literally enforced in this situation. The Hadley Housing Authority is not participating in it, and that's what the bylaw says, that the Hadley Housing Authority has to supervise it, or whoever, that process works. I mean, it strikes me as the type of situation that a variance is appropriate. I mean, if this is a unique piece of property dealing with a unique issue that doesn't affect other properties in this zoning area. I mean,
It's appropriate.
I'm gonna echo what Mr. Belvedere said in that, I mean, in terms of, and our task at assigning or granting variances, and that, undue hardship, or necessarily also unoccupied, unmaintained units, in terms of, I mean, and whereas the value will be given into a escrow fund, at which then the town, which again is out beyond our reach. I mean, where Mr. Roberts has been left, not to any detriment of his own, only because of the Hadley Housing Authority saying that they don't want to. My question earlier was, at what stage did you find that out? And was it not agreed to before the ground had even been broken by the Hadley Housing? So had Hadley Housing, even before, ground had been broken, had they said, yeah, this is great, and then they said, no, we're not gonna take care of it, or was it just a strict adherence to the law, and then, or the bylaw, excuse me, and then finding out that they weren't?
I just, once I got the approval from the planning board, I moved forward with the project, started the site work and everything. When I knew that I had to comply with this as part of my permit, I sent a letter to Hadley Housing Authority saying that the bylaw says I must do this, and you shall do this. And their answer was, we're not.
Well,
Or
why,
we can't.
Or unable to.
Yeah.
why didn't you before you even dug?
Why would I do that? You guys crafted the bylaw, not me.
Well, wait a minute. You read that and you built it. We didn't build it, you built it.
Why would I assume that?
Why wouldn't you have asked the housing authority if they would administer this?
Because the bylaw said they would.
Right. So there's another catch-22 in here.
Here.
The
Go see the-
inclusionary zoning bylaw, which is section 25, applies on its face to senior housing units. And it also, the inclusionary zoning requirement can be met by providing a unit on site, by rehabbing a unit off-site, or by making a payment in lieu.
What section are you specifically?
Well, Section 25, let me just see specifically where I am in there.
2.4.
Oh, yeah, 2543.
25-4.
Read section 25.7. As an alternative to the requirements of section 25.5 or section 25.6, and to the extent permitted by law, an applicant may contribute and establish local housing trust fund to be used for the development of affordable housing, which we don't have a local housing trust fund. And that's what I'm saying. How can you do this without having an established trust fund?
So the problem, the glitch I was talking about, we can get back to that. The glitch I was talking about is the inclusionary zoning, which applies on its face to senior housing, offers three options. The senior housing bylaw, special permit to allow senior housing, only allows the providing units. So there's a conflict between two sections of the bylaw right there, which we're not aware of. The inclusionary zoning was adopted in 2006, and the senior housing in 2008. Since they were adopted, we have not had any subdivisions that triggered the inclusionary zoning bylaw filed, except for the one that was filed tonight. And we have not had any senior housing projects except Mr. Roberts. At the time we adopted the senior housing, they had active interest expressed by at least 4 developers, not including Mr. Roberts. They all went away, he's the only one who's here, and we discovered there is this conflict between two sections of the bylaw. And unfortunately, sometimes that's how you have to find out where the problems are, by going through an application.
You know, I understand Mr. Michikowski's concern that there isn't an established trust fund, but again, in terms of our ability and, you know, being the zoning board of appeals, that, I mean, what else can he do? What else can he do?
What else can you do?
Leave
You don't
units sit
act on
empty
it.
and rot, or contribute the funds to?
How can you act on something that's not established in this town? Tell me that.
You could, I mean, that's what the purposes of an escrow account would be, that you could then establish the trust fund down the road, or the
You're
town
making
can.
you're making that up. The town has to approve this prior, not later, prior to that. And it didn't do that. And I don't know how you guys can act or give a variance, because that was never established in this town to this day.
I think we can give a variance.
Oh, sure you can.
Completely outside the fee in lieu, the donation in lieu, because
Yeah, right.
I don't think that is even I don't think that's even related to the variance. The question about the variance is whether the application of the bylaw, literally in this case, is gonna provide an undue hardship. And I don't. I mean,
My main concern is the conditions for the trust fund. How is that going to?
we can't put conditions on a variance.
I'm
so-
not putting conditions on it, I'm
I
saying
mean, that's
that is
outside of
my
us.
concern. And if that somehow can be worked out, then.
We'd be happy to, yes.
But that would be part of the special permit process. I mean, that's gonna be part of the conditions on the special permit.
A mixed bag.
Yeah.
You make a good point. In other words, if you do grant the variance, and then we have to negotiate, so,
Right.
I mean, all we're essentially here to say, I mean, in terms of our little board down here at the end, is whether it's possible for Mr. Roberts to, you know, put a staple and move on with this. I mean, at the point that he is in construction right now, and the town's inability to decide what to do with the funds, and whether that's not really that's outside of our scope.
If there's still no action taken on this, he still can move on with his project. There's no saying that he has to stop with his project. He's got 30-something units, including these 5.
But he is committed, he has committed to the senior affordable housing, and so he really is in a bind. He can't go on with it unless that's fulfilled.
Why, did he say that to you?
So the reality is, and I think we've had the discussions with the planning board before, is that, so Mr. Roberts is proposing 35 units. When he's laying out these units, he's laying them out to make sure that he has certain types of units in certain locations. Once he chooses to put a certain unit in a certain location, that obviously forsakes any other unit that could go in that location. So if those units have to be affordable, then he has to redesign the project in a way to put those units instead of other units. So when it's, yes, he can go and build 30, sure, but you can't just put 5 at the end and say, okay, those are the affordable. That's contrary to what the affordable housing is supposed to be. It's supposed to be interspersed. So right now, he has kept certain spaces open, which has caused him to bring in pumping trucks to get the cement for the foundations in there. So this, I mean, it's a real issue, not just, okay, when we get to those last 5 units, we'll deal with it. So as he's going and constructing, it's causing an issue.
Want to make a motion? All right, I'll make a motion to grant the variance from the affordability requirements of section 27.5.8. Subject to, continuing approvals by the planning board's special permitting process.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
There's a 20-day appeal period after that?
Once it's filed with the town clerk.
I'm going home to bed.
Now to the planning board.
Now to the planning board.
So we simply need to vote to amend the special permit and decide on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel
Take
better.
care of yourself.
Feel better.
Take care of your health.
Thank you.
And the mechanism for the
thank you guys.
funds.
Amount and mechanism, and then just as a brief aside, one of the other pieces requested in the modification was to extend, you may recall that you had approved this A&R plan some time ago for the addition of this piece.
Right.
And I just wanted to make sure that that piece, as part of this modification, was included under the permit, just
Oh,
for
okay.
idle purposes
So
only.
do this piece and the escrow.
And the escrow, yes, that would be that. Thank you.
So do we assume that there's going to be no challenge and we proceed with our part of the agreement, or should we wait for
don't
the
assume
20 days?
anything. We don't assume anything on a challenge. They have theirs, we approve or disapprove ours, and items are filed, and they fall where they may. So we don't have to assume that they will or will not be approved, appealed.
Okay.
Because if it is, it is, if it isn't, it isn't.
I know one thing, this thing was not spelled out in total detail to us. And I don't know why I asked Mr. Dwyer to talk to town council, either to set up a meeting with this planning board. I think it's very important for this town, and still that hasn't been done.
Well, I've emailed Attorney Bard, and I've asked him for samples of affordable housing trusts in other communities that they serve. He has not responded to me on that yet.
So why are we jumping ahead of something that we totally don't understand? That's what really gets me. You guys are just pushing, ramming stuff through that we need to be careful with this. I don't know who the hell you guys are working for, Mr. Roberts or the town of Hadley? I don't like this at all, I'll tell you right now. This is bull. We don't even have an established trust, and we're accepting this, making deals with this, but we don't even have an established trust. Or we don't even know what other options are available. Everybody's second guessing around here. I don't want to second guess anything. We're not voting for nothing over here on this project to extend nothing or do anything else until we get this squared away.
When you mention other options available, do you have an idea of what you would have, what you would?
You're the lawyer, you should figure it all out.
We have, I mean, I think that's why we're here for this project at this time. I mean, I hear you mention the North Hadley Meeting House and potential renovations there. There's gonna be $350,000 that the town could potentially use to either rehab that, convert that into affordable units, or to do something with, if it's what the board right now so chooses.
Why don't you guys make a deal and do that?
I guess, what do you mean make a deal?
Take your affordable housing and put it over in that North Hadley Hall.
I think we'd be happy to contribute sums, and then I think on a separate note, we could have Mr. Roberts have conversations with the town to see if it's a viable project. I don't think it's necessarily quid pro quo where we're taking it from here and putting it there, but I think at least for the time being, the start would be to have a nest egg to fund the potential for study of that hall, for potential improvements of the hall.
This board is not a developer. He's a developer. And it's just like, I could see that working, and you could go on with your project and put all premium housing there and satisfy the law and the affordable.
Yeah. So John's actually correct that under the inclusionary zoning bylaw, one of the options is to put units elsewhere.
Right.
So yes, that would be a way of dealing with it, but we're a year and a half away from.
Right, and I think that would be the suggestion. I don't know, I haven't talked to Barry about it yet, but to put the money there and then to see, to study it. I mean, I think you guys, Barry, if there's something that he can do to help out the town, he does something to help out the town. And if it's taking a look to see if that is a viable redevelopment, or to use his connections to find somebody else that may find it appropriate to redevelop. I mean, I think that's the type of relationship here. We're not just coming in and saying, we want this or us. I mean, Barry's been here, he's gonna continue to be here, he's gonna continue to work with the town. Really what we're asking for, I mean, I can't believe we're asking to give you $350,000.
So I have a couple of things. One is that I think the $350,000 will go further if someone is skimming off a percentage of the sale price to process applicants. That's money that's not going to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So we have access to more money here. I don't want to prejudge the approval of or rely on the approval of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund alone, but I also think that through no one's fault, Mr. Roberts is caught in classic catch-22. His project is subject to 2 bylaws that are mutually inconsistent in some points. So we're not really setting a precedent for the future here. We are dealing with a very specific problem that one bylaw tells him to do one thing, another bylaw tells him to do something else. He can't do both. He can't comply with both bylaws. So I think it is an appropriate resolution, given that we only have 2 town meetings a year, to try to work this through in a way. So the variance has been issued, has been voted to excuse Mr. Roberts from complying with the affordability component section of the senior housing bylaw. He did not ask for and was not given a variance from the affordability section of the inclusionary zoning bylaw. So now we're in the part where you can either build us 5 units, find us 5 units elsewhere, or make a payment in lieu. But I do also appreciate that we don't necessarily have a place to put it at the moment. So we have to work through that. And even if it is, well, yeah, we just have to work through that. And that's the biggest sticking point for me, that, okay, we can take the money, but what do we do with it? We don't have any place to put it.
And another thing, you're not town council. Until this is done, that it's legally binding, so we don't get in the same catch-22 as it is now with this zoning, whatever happened. And I don't know why town council never picked that up in the first place.
I could suggest that it be held in escrow pending the results of Springtown meeting, and if an affordable housing trust is created, it would fund within 7 days, that affordable housing trust. Then we could come back to the planning board and figure out what to do with those funds. So you get to see where it goes, you get a sense of the town. The town has the opportunity to say, yes, we like this affordable housing trust, let's fund it. We can fund it, and if not, then you have the understanding of, okay, the town doesn't support that, maybe you'll have a better understanding why, and then the planning board has the opportunity to say, these funds should go to, or...
I think that's a reasonable resolution for the timing. Joe, you're on a CPA. Do you have any idea how much money is in a CPA for affordable
I
housing?
think it's about 65,000.
Really? That's all?
But not, yeah.
Okay.
There's all strings attached with once you use CPA.
Oh, I understand, I understand a string.
Well, no, not in the housing percentage.
Really? I thought it was gonna be.
Maybe I'll
I thought it
double
was
check.
10%. I thought it was 10% of CPA funds had to be allotted for affordable housing.
And we haven't been spending any, so it's been growing.
That's what I
Would
was
you
thinking.
guys be interested in doing a proposal for Hadley Hall
I'll find out.
Yeah, just
for affordable housing?
because all I'm saying there is that the CPA has funds, they've got to have a mechanism to do something with them. This affordable trust could be something if it passes, but in the meantime, I think Attorney's suggestion is a good one, that it's held in escrow pending the outcome of the May town meeting, and if it passes, it's funded. If it fails, you come back to us with, okay, what do you want to do with this?
And what's he gonna stop with? He's gonna stop construction until town meeting?
No, he's already got the approval, so the money's gonna be in escrow. Mr. Roberts.
He can't do nothing until after the appeal period.
That's right, after the appeal. I mean, we're assuming there's
You
no.
can do it at risk.
You know,
Don't assume anything.
and,
Yeah, I think that's a fair compromise, and then if we're back before you, we can figure it out. And I think, in the interim, take a look at North Hadley Hall, see
I'm
where
happy to. I never give it a thought, but I'm happy to.
and see if that's maybe, that 350 can come right back to Mr. Roberts to do something on
Well,
North Hadley Hall.
I'm thinking that would be a home run, not only for him, but for the town.
Sure. And I mean, you know that he's done center school, that's not a quote-unquote affordable project, but he's in the process of,
That would be
the center school over in Hatfield, and so, not to put something else on your plate, but, I mean, like I said before.
He says it's gonna be, various is gonna be a long winter anyway. Can't run draft horses in the winter.
That's right, that's right. Needs a hobby. Yeah, I mean, we're happy to take a look at it. I mean, I think you know us, but you know better.
Mr. Dwyer, any other comments? Anything new? Mr. Dwyer, entertain a motion?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how to word it.
Boy, I like this ran-through job here you guys are doing.
So what was the date of the original decision?
When are we gonna sit down
February 2.
with town council about this trust fund or anything else? You guys are ramming stuff through, and
When Attorney Bard or Copeland and Page consider this.
who the hell is he working for? The town of Hadley or who?
You asked
If you can't hire him, get another one.
Trust, affordable housing trust, pretty much be boilerplate with a few things added. It's pretty much boilerplate, you're not recreating the wheel.
Yeah, they've already got a trust.
They've already got it.
They've already got the wording that we just need to find out. if
But
we can-
there's all kinds of things you can add or delete out of it,
That's
too.
right, we just need to know, there's certain things in there we obviously want to delete or amend certainly, but that's separate from Mr. Roberts' concern right here.
I'm not voting for nothing. Not until this is thing cleared out.
So variance from the ZBA.
$27.5.8.
Yeah, the strip of land.
Okay.
$6,934 square feet.
What do you rolling everything all in one motion, or are you gonna, what's you got here?
Will be in
Yeah.
motion.
We're really just doing three things: the amount of payment in lieu, conditions of the escrow, and how much was it?
6,934 square feet.
6,934.
I'd like to make that in two different motions. I'm not voting for the first two. I don't vote for the third.
Okay, make it two motions.
Okay.
Okay, let's just do that first. Okay, we're going to, a motion to amend the site plan originally approved on February 2 of 2016. Proposed changes are not significant or major, can be addressed without reopening the public hearing. Approve the following change: add 6,934 square feet of land to the site plan. All filings and conditions of the original decision remain unchanged.
So moved.
Motion. Second.
That was, he was second, I made the motion.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So then I'll make a motion to amend the site plan originally approved on 2/2/16 as follows. The board determines the project changes are significant and reopened the public hearing on the original application. Planning board has reviewed and approved the following changes. Based on the variance from the ZBA, compliance with section 27.5.8 is excused. Applicant to deposit $350,000 in escrow with Bacon Wilson pending town meeting action on Affordable Housing Trust Fund. If the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is approved, funds to be deposited therein. If not, to be revisited.
Wait for the date on that.
In June 2018?
Yeah, that sounds good. Why June 2018, yeah.
Okay. And all other findings remain in effect.
That's the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Yep. How can you vote on that when the final decision of the ZBA is not valid until the 20-day appeal period is final? And you guys are voting on something that you didn't pass the appeal period. How can you do that?
It's based on the variance. If the variance is...
The variance is valid after 20 days. Not now, it's not valid. How can you do that?
If I may, from our perspective, we would argue that it is valid, and if it is appealed, then we would contest the validity of that in court. But while taking that logic, flipping it on the other side, then if there's a denial, then the denial would not be valid until after the 20-day appeal period. So somebody could say, well, that's actually an approval.
If it was appealed, we still would have to hold it until it was settled. That ZBA is not valid until the 20-day appeal period is gone by,
I think we're just gonna...
right?
I think we're gonna disagree, but...
Well, we can disagree all you want, but you're not the one that's voting, I am.
So this, as I read it, this is conditioned upon the variance being in effect. If the variance isn't in effect, the condition is not met.
And we still didn't set up a trust fund. I just...
Well, that's a whole other thing we have to visit, the trust fund.
That should have been done
Do we want to
first.
do away with that whole section? That's a whole nother argument.
Why can't we do this the right way, once and for all? You know it screwed up the zoning law, so why can't we just correct it once and for all?
Like what? Like what?
Like what? Get an attorney in here, our town council, not
Well,
other
that's-
lawyers.
That's what we may have to visit. But
It's
that's
not me, we should.
It's like the United States Constitution, it's a living document. The zoning bylaw is a living document.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second.
You're just making up crap, no.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Right.
Any opposed?
Negatory.
We have Motion passes 4-1 opposed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. On to North Hadley Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Whoa,
Keep dreaming.
Hold up. I think you know us. I think you know Barry. He's a man of his
That's
word.
what I'm afraid of. I had to do that to you.
Thank you.
They can save the Emerson, or they can save it for the other.
No, that was the,
Yeah,
a dynamite thing.
we're
Okay.
serious.
Sir, you're here for something.
I offered to show you guys the car.
Pardon?
I offered to show you guys the car. I'm sticking around.
Oh!
My brother-in-law bought one. I
Oh,
was
okay.
out in California.
Ted,
I
Mr.
wasn't
Michowski,
impressed.
Mr. Ted Michowski. What have you got? You're up.
I think I was here at the recent, was it the last meeting? I mentioned the concern with the aquifer maps, the zoning maps. And I guess the crux of the point I'm trying to make here is, I appeared before this board in 2013, it might have been 12. In any event, the board consisted of, I guess, 3 members. Mr. Starazinski was not a member, nor was my brother, but you had Mr., I believe it was
Mr. Devine and
Devine and Sanderson, maybe? or-
Mrs. Sanders.
Yeah, so you all agreed that you would create a map for Mr. Nyhart so he could enforce the bylaw for the aquifer protection. And this has been a long going issue with neighbors on Lawrence Plain Road. And I think you're well aware of the situation that, and Mr. Smith and Mrs. Wilson did some alterations there and caused drainage to change its course. And in violation of the aquifer protection. So although this work was done in 2010, it was October, the diversion. So obviously it's over 7 years and statutes of limitations have probably run out on that. So I think in Mr. Smith's mind, he was doing the right thing. In fact, it was wrong, and I think you all made a point of that it was wrong, that he violated a natural course of flow of water. And because it wasn't town land, you wouldn't act. But then I came back and argued about the aquifer protection in the zone. And Mr. Nyhart could not act because he mentioned, and I think he said it this way, he said he legally doesn't have the instrument to do it, meaning the maps, on the zoning map. These are the current zoning maps from South Hadley.
No, those are not the zoning maps.
I mean, tax assessor's maps. All right, so, but what you voted on was to include and have an inclusion of the aquifer protection on the assessor's map. So these are the most current ones. Matter of fact, the ink's not quite dry yet. Mr. Zidane provided them to me around 3:30 this afternoon from the South Hadley line to the Coolidge Bridge. I don't see any aquifer protection. So Mr. Nyhart cannot act. He said he can't, doesn't have the instrument. And I remember Mr. Zagradic pointed out that he does have a map, and there is a map in the office there, but it's not a assessor's map. So legally, he cannot act. That's what he said. That's an aerial view, it's to scale, and apparently Mr. Nyhart is not schooled to interpret that map onto these maps, so he can't act. So you said you would do it, and I believe you said you were going to have the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to do it, or later on you said that, but initially you said you would have it done. The fact is, you haven't had it done.
Well,
I don't know what the commission has done, but their commission has omitted putting these on
So
the
now I'm
map.
going to answer your question. So Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, we asked them what plans they had. It turns out they only had the zoning map. They do not have the tax maps down there. Those live in the assessor's department.
So,
I have been in contact with Mr. Zadanek about what is involved in adding the zoning map to the tax map as what's called a layer. And I told him what we had to work with. And I know he sent an email to the mapping company and asked them if what we had to work with was enough to overlay the zoning map on the tax map. Now, I did this in the last few weeks after you came in the last time, just to figure out what was going on.
well,
And we've not heard back from the mapping company, or at least if Dan has heard back, I have not heard from him.
well, can I say this? This is a colossal waste of my time. 4 years have passed, and now you're telling me this. Mr. Zagradnik was right. There's a map in the office.
Yes.
So, but whoever, I don't know what the job description of the zoning enforcement officer is, but maybe.
We don't either, he doesn't work for us.
You don't even know what his description, don't you interact?
He does not work for
Well,
us.
he sends me here all the time. He sent me here last week for nothing. I'm a wild goose chase.
He reports to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen appoints him. He does not report to us. I know we're not trying to give you the runaround.
Well, you are, because you promised me they would be on these maps. Here they are.
It's not,
They were omitted.
no, you misunderstood. We did say that we would look into it. We can't make it happen. The assessor's department does not work for us either.
Who works for who here? Why aren't, it's a zone.
There
Why
are
is-
5 people in this room, and we are the planning department. We have authority, such as it is, over 5 people.
Is this a catch-22?
No.
Well, why can't Mr. Nyhart act? Maybe we just,
I don't know.
Teddy, you're assuming we got more power than we do.
Yeah.
Okay, we
Mr.
don't have-
well, I'm sorry if I made that assumption.
I have asked
Thank you for enlightening me.
I have asked Mr. Zadanek if the information you have requested can be added to the zoning maps, or to the tax maps. He, in turn, has asked the mapping company if it can be done.
Can I do this? Can I bring in Ty and Bond, Mr. Tom Kuchar? He can interpret the map and say, yes, he did that. Now it's
At your expense, you can do anything you want.
But no one can act. You can't act, Nyhart can't act, Zadanek can't act.
Ty and Bond isn't working for us. We can't. spend
Well, they
money.
made the map,
Which map?
the aquifer protection, the expanded one. They made the map. I don't know who made the original one, but it violated the original one too. Even more
I
so,
don't
because it
know.
went, it diverted from the aquifer out of the aquifer.
All we have is the map the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission has provided.
I think you're right. I think Ty and Bond did draw up.
Absolutely correct there.
They drew
The
up-
second map, I don't
Yeah.
know, I think Huntley did the first one.
Maybe, I'm not
There
sure.
were 2.
There were 2 separate maps, because there was a.
But it even more so violated the first one, because it diverted the water completely out of the aquifer onto a non-aquifer.
We have no enforcement authority. If we can't, yeah, you
All we
can,
can do is ask other boards to do stuff. We can't force any, we don't have authority over any other board or any other.
Why does
office.
Mr. Nyhart send me here though, then? Why can't he just answer the question when it says
Debbie,
zoning?
what do you think?
We don't know that.
He says, get lost, go somewhere else.
Well, I
That's
was
what he
here
said.
last week and that was more colossal waste of time. I came here because he he wrote it on a stationery from the clerk's office. When I filed, I had to come here. And you wanted me to file a site plan review, which was totally wrong. And you misspoke. He said you misspoke. So if I'm getting direction from, is he right or is he right? I mean, he said you misspoke. You didn't say anything. Did you misspoke?
if he didn't say anything, he
You
didn't.
concurred. You were here. You were here when he misspoke.
Well, you asked a question, Mr. Zagradnik gave you an answer based on your question. But then after looking further into the
I'm
question.
just trying to mitigate everything here, not litigate. But I'm not getting any, I'm getting a runaround. I go to
We're not
the
trying to give you the runaround.
zoning enforcement officer, he sends me here. He tells me he doesn't have the instrument. Who has to make the maps? It's a zoning map.
The
zoning
zoning
map-
map is ours to incorporate the zoning map into the assessor's map. The assessor's department must do that. We do not.
But you have a zoning enforcement officer who is unable to interpret the maps. He cannot look at an aerial view.
We can't answer that question. We don't know why he's not capable of interpreting that. You'd have to.
I didn't say not capable, he's unable.
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 I don't know why he's not.
Why don't we,
I don't know why he can't do that. We don't.
Oh, believe me, we researched this because we did have a request at one point for a determination of who the zoning enforcement officer works for. So we did research it. He works for the select board. We cannot tell him what to do.
right, but earlier this.
By state law.
In
by
this
state law,
meeting,
that's-
someone came forward about some issue that he was in the aquifer protection. And how did you determine he was there? How did you know his parcel was in the aquifer protection?
Because the developer of the project that he is located in applied for a business use in the aquifer protection special permit.
And he stated it's in aquifer protection.
Yes.
Yes.
So I have to hire a professional, Ty and Bond, and someone who likes Mr. Tom Kuchar to come in here and say that Ted is right, and then go to the zoning enforcement officer?
You don't need to come and tell us you're in the aquifer or not. You need to tell the zoning enforcement officer whether they are or not, because that's where the dispute is coming from.
Well, we have the abutters that they think that, you know, it's okay to do this, and quite frankly, I don't think now that if the building inspector says, well, you know, they're not wrong and not acting, and if they're doing something that's totally inappropriate and illegal in my beliefs, I mean, your inaction
If they're
is
doing-
causing a lot of damages.
If they're doing something in the aquifer that is causing, what's the right word? Issues. Because of diverting water inappropriately, maybe the Conservation Commission is a place.
Well, your
No, no,
board,
okay,
your board,
no,
wait a minute, your board overlooked, wait a minute, your
we're not
board.
gonna resolve.
Your board overlooked a subdivision by Mr. St. John. And then eventually that property went back to Mr. Smith. But it had to do, and I was here, we talked about the drainage. And you said nothing would change, Mr. Maximowski. You told me nothing can change. What changed? And then prior to that public hearing, Mrs. Wilson was here, put her land in conservation restriction. She's filled an entire natural ravine and no one acts.
If you have objections to the actions or inactions of the zoning enforcement officer, you may appeal that to the zoning board of appeals. Those are the three people who are here left today.
Who were they?
The zoning board of appeals.
Who were they? There was, like, there's three of them there. Who was to the far left?
Bombardier.
I don't know.
Mr.
That was
Bombardier.
Bombardier and
Bombardier.
I don't happen to know the
I
other
don't know,
names.
I don't know if
was Mr. John Kokoski still the chairman?
He
Yes,
is,
he is, but he was out of town today, so
Yeah.
the gentleman in the middle was a substitute.
Well, I appeared before that board in the past, and Mr. Kokoski lied. They all lied.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna go in front of a bunch of liars.
The route to appeal the decision of the building inspector or the zoning enforcement officer is to the ZBA. That is the sole appellate route. If you don't like what he did.
Well, I don't like what he did. I just like what he didn't do.
Same thing.
Same thing, you can appeal his failure to act as well, I believe. But. it
I
has
can't
to be-
spend and waste my whole life fighting a bunch of dummies. I'm sorry. Bye.
We have a bill to pay.
What?
We've got a bill to pay.
I can come back
You can
now?
come back.
The smoke cleared?
We have a bill to pay to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for basic services of Larry, or I call it Larry, of $452.06. Motion to pay it?
Motion to pay the bill.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
What was the amount?
452.06. Anything else?
I have nothing else.
Anything else? Topics of future discussion, I would like to see on the next time Larry's here, to, we've all got copies, or if not, we can get them to you, of this senior trust. We want to make sure we have the articles for the annual town meeting for the senior trust and the amendments to the senior housing and inclusionary zoning bylaws. We don't want to miss the deadline, or I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on those items. We want to make sure we get moving on that.
So
I
that
want
is-
to talk about accessory apartments.
It seems like Larry wasn't really in tune with the affordable trust thing at all.
No, I'm not talking, the affordable trust wouldn't be with Larry. We would
Yeah.
find, because we got a copy of the basic thing, find out how we would want to change it, but talk to Larry about the two zoning bylaws we want to change.
I
So we
would
can make,
assume maybe Bill would corroborate this, that what's included in the trust will be pretty flexible. Why you do a lot of things.
right, I know, but I want to take out what we don't want, maybe add what we do want, so that we're not at the 19th hour, trying to decide, well, gee, let's look at this now, the time's running out. We have a lot of, we have reasonable time to do it.
Really open-ended.
So,
What about trying to get a hold of that woman about housing, affordable housing and...
Yeah, the woman, you're right, Johnny, Amy Flayton is on the board of
No, I'm
Valley
talking the
CDC.
one from Boston.
Well, this one is the Valley CDC.
No.
They administer trusts in Northampton. And it would be interesting to see how they do it, what they charge.
Well, I
What
would
are their-
like to contact that woman in Boston.
the one who's
Well, she probably won't come, but I think the person from Northampton
Yeah,
would
she
come.
would come down here to a meeting and then have an in-depth meeting.
Well, she's going to,
Okay. All right. Topics for future discussion.
Okay.
Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the amendments to inclusionary and senior housing and accessory apartments. Was there something else?
That was it. That was
Okay.
That's enough. You want
Okay.
Mitch to come back here again?
And, yeah, I'll put that down. And we want to do that when Larry's here.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
That was gonna be the first meeting in December.
Yeah, so we had asked Larry to take tonight off because we had a lot of other stuff going on.
I probably won't be here the first Tuesday in January. What is it, January 2nd?
Second.
So your annual truck to down south?
Yeah. I'll be
Okay.
flying back from Bogota on the 4th,
Okay.
weather permitting.
All right. Not a problem.
See a novena for you.
Motion to adjourn?
well, wait, does Mr. Captain want to say something, or is David, what's his?
Pardon?
Yeah, you,
Been studying this plan intently. I've got questions if you guys want to go off the record, otherwise I'd wait for next week. It is late and we've had a long night.
Why?
Oh, we don't.
We didn't cancel the
Public
meeting.
service.
We'd rather have answered on the record.
Sure. So, of course, so I was curious if I'm here, if it would be allowed to put these universal electric charging stations up here in the front.
As long as it's outside, no.
No.
Okay.
You couldn't be outside the 50-foot setback. No parking, this is a 50-foot setback, you'd have to be this side of the line.
Right. So I guess the question is, it's not parking, it's charging. So it's not codified.
It's
it's
the
a
same thing.
structure.
It's a structure.
It's a structure,
Right,
right?
and that's also the maneuvering field for people
For the
who are going
pumps,
into the
okay.
pumps.
What about over here?
There's something over here.
Yeah, these are the tanks, but these are additional spaces.
They had to put them in.
You have to put them in to comply with the 2-for-1 parking.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just trying to see if there's anywhere else that we could place them that might give you a broader sense of comfort in the back. And obviously you can't, you have a code that requires no structures in the front, but if it could be incorporated into something, even into the sign, because the sign's permitted, if we can incorporate the chargers actually onto the sign, then people could charge in either
We
area.
don't want to see it.
Good try. No, signs are-
In a 50-foot front yard.
Signs are 15 feet back and they're specially,
Especially permitted, right? I was thinking,
Why don't you go to Pride's engineer with your plan and let them come up with a proposal?
yeah, absolutely. I was just trying to give you the opportunity to have some.
So the other thing is that if you, they may have a better idea. When we saw the original site plan, we did not have the pad site on it. That was just put in there for drainage calculations for the Conservation Commission.
Right,
I don't know what their timetable is for that.
exactly.
None of this has been approved. This is the only thing that's been approved. This was just
Absolutely.
for,
It was the concept of the whole project.
right, you want to see what the project could look like. So we put that in for that, but that side, the left side was not approved.
And I know there was a question about the covering over the canopy, I guess there was a size question about that. Is there any restriction on the size of this canopy? Because we could potentially bring charging stations up here and put them on the same islands as the diesel.
Yeah, that's the diesel
That's the
pump.
diesel pumps.
Right. So because it's diesel as opposed to gasoline, the point of ignition distance is much shorter. So because it's not a volatile fuel. So we could put charging on the same island as assuming the chief agrees. But that would
be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could incorporate, that fire code issues aside,
Yes.
if you could put these in parallel with these, that would be acceptable.
Right, and that would give you a greater sense of comfort
And that
about
would,
parking.
or over, like you said, if you're doing next to a diesel pump, that's okay.
Although I suspect Pride would not want
That
diesel
aside,
pump occupied for an hour and
Actually,
a half.
you'd be surprised, a lot of the stations, because again, you can only, if we put one handle here, it can only be used on one side or the other. And so it doesn't necessarily occupy the entire diesel area, plus I think he has diesel down here as well. But again, it's something up to Pride.
Yeah.
But that would take, charging out of that area and move it into operational space.
aside from a business point of view, that's okay with us and fire code issues. So we're not approving it. You've got other issues that you would need to be looked at.
We're being creative, but yes, absolutely, many approvals necessary to do anything like that.
Right.
Obviously, first being with the
You've
land.
got 480 volts. Like, what would you say? How many watts per?
It's 120 kW, and that's 480 volts, which is being converted through the rectifiers instead of
120
rectifiers.
120,000 watts divided by 480. You're talking 50 amps per pump.
It's about 50 amps flowing, yeah, because each
That's
cabinet.
that's a serious zap.
It's a good amount of power, although with our systems, the way it works is when you plug the handle into the car, the system makes a connection. It's called a handshake. And so what it'll say is I've checked the integrity of the entire line, there is no disruption of service, now you can flow the
Yeah,
energy.
and I understand all that. I'm not questioning the safety of it. I'm simply saying that there is a lot of power flowing through that 480 pump into
Absolutely.
the car.
True.
Into the battery, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Right, and so chief, would obviously take that into account when
Yeah, and there's there's a whole bunch of safety features because a normal person
Should not come into contact with that.
doesn't want to play with 480 volts.
Absolutely.
I know many electricians don't even want to play with
I
480
didn't have
volts.
no help from you.
Well, as I said, it is late, and I appreciate your time, especially your input on this, and if anybody wants to come down and see the car, I'd be happy to take you guys out, so.
Okay, thank
Why didn't
you.
Thank you.
mention it?
do you drive a Tesla?
I do. I recently bought one.
Is one out there?
Yeah, it's Model X downstairs with the gullwing doors and everything, so.
Well,
No, we'll be right. I got-
instead of passing this.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's history. Thank you, and thank you, John. See you too early.